The morning of December 1st, 1948, broke clear and warm over the South Australian coast. It was the very start of summer in the southern hemisphere, and the beach at Somerton, just south of Adelaide, was already showing signs of the date's coming heat. The water moved gently against the sand. A few early walkers passed along the esplanade, and against the seawall near the entrance to the crippled children's home, a man was sitting upright in the sand, his head tilted gently to one side, his legs extended in front of him, his feet crossed at the ankles, his right arm folded across his chest. He looked, from a distance, like someone who had simply paused to rest, like someone who had walked down to the shore the night before to watch the sunset and leaned back against the seawall to enjoy the breeze coming in off the water. But the man on the beach was not resting. The man on the beach was dead. And in the 78 years that have passed since his body was discovered there, almost nothing about him has been simple to explain. This is the story of the man on Somerton Beach. The first people to notice him were a young couple walking along the sand the previous evening. They saw him at around 7 slumped against the seawall, and they assumed he was drunk or sleeping. They watched for a moment, saw what looked like the man lifting his arm and letting it fall again, and walked on. When the body was discovered the next morning, just before 6:30, the police were called. There was no sign of a struggle, no wound, no blood. The sand around him was undisturbed. The man was about 6 feet tall, in his early 40s, athletic build, with broad shoulders and reddish-brown hair going slightly gray at the temples. His teeth were unusual. He was missing several in places where teeth do not normally go missing in a healthy adult. In his pockets, the police found an unused train ticket from Adelaide to a place called Henley Beach, a used bus ticket, a box of matches, a packet of chewing gum, an aluminum comb, a packet of cigarettes, Kensington's brand inside, but the packet itself for a different brand altogether, called Army Club. And resting on the collar of his jacket, half smoked, was a single cigarette that had apparently fallen from his lips at the moment he died. What he did not have was the most important thing of all. He had no wallet, no passport, no driver's license, not a letter, not so much as a laundry mark on his clothes. Every single label on every single piece of clothing had been carefully cut away. There was no way to tell who this man was. When the police circulated his photograph in the newspaper, no one came forward. Not a friend, not a family member, not a co-worker, not a wife. He was, for all intents and purposes, a man who had appeared on a beach in South Australia and died there, leaving no trace of where he had come from. The autopsy only deepened the mystery. The pathologist found that the man had been in excellent physical condition. Strong heart, healthy lungs, powerful legs, with calf muscles one examiner compared to those of a dancer or a long-distance runner. His hands were soft, suggesting he had not done manual labor in some time. Nothing about him suggested a natural cause of death. But his organs were heavily congested with blood. His spleen was enlarged. His liver was damaged in a way consistent with poisoning. The pathologist concluded that the man had been killed by some kind of poison, and given the speed of the lack of obvious symptoms, almost certainly a fairly rare and clever one. The problem was that when the man's tissues were tested for every poison the lab knew how to detect, the lab found none of them. So whatever had killed him had left no trace the science of the late 1940s could identify. The body was eventually embalmed. A plaster cast was made of the man's face in case it might one day help to identify him. And then, several months later, when no one had come for him, he was buried in a marked grave in West Terrace Cemetery in Adelaide. His tombstone read simply, "The Unknown Man." A few weeks into the investigation, the police caught a break. At the cloakroom of the Adelaide railway station, they found a brown suitcase that had been checked in on November the 30th, the day before the body was discovered. Inside were the clothes and personal effects of an adult man: a red dressing gown, pajamas, slippers, shaving equipment, trousers with orange-red sand caught in the cuffs, a stenciling kit of the kind used at the time to mark cargo on ships, and a reel of orange-colored wax thread, uncommon in Australia but commonly available in the United States. And, like the body, almost every label on every piece of clothing has been carefully removed. Almost. On 3 items, 3 small tags had been overlooked. They read T. Kiani, Kiani, and Kian. The police thought, briefly, that they had a name, but T. Kiani led nowhere. The only T. Kiani on record anywhere was a sailor who had died at sea years earlier and was demonstrably not their man. Whoever this man was, he had taken great care to remove every trace of his identity, and he had almost succeeded. For nearly 6 months, that is where the case stood. A nameless body in a marked grave. A suitcase full of nothing. A photograph in the newspapers that nobody could put a name to. Then, in June of 1949, a pathologist re-examined the dead man's clothing one more time, and he found something that everyone before him had missed. Soon, into the waistband of the man's trousers was a tiny, almost invisible fob pocket. A pocket designed originally to hold a watch fob. And inside that pocket, rolled up so tightly it had been overlooked in every previous search, was a small piece of paper. The pathologist unrolled it carefully. It was a fragment torn from a printed page with 2 words on it in an elaborate script. 2 words in Persian: Tamam shud. In English, the words mean "it is finished" or "it is ended." They are the final words of one of the most famous works of poetry in the world, a centuries-old Persian poem called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. The poem is a meditation on the brevity of life. Its message is that we should drink from life's cup while we can, because all of us, sooner or later, come to the same final line. Tamam shud. It is finished. A reporter at the local newspaper recognized the words immediately. The police put out a public call asking anyone who might have a copy of the Rubaiyat that was missing those final words to come forward. And, almost incredibly, somebody did. A man in Adelaide, who has never been publicly named, came forward with a copy of the Rubaiyat. He told the police that some weeks earlier, around the time of the man's death, he had returned to his unlocked car parked in Glenelg, less than a mile from where the body had been found, and discovered the book in the back seat. He had assumed at the time that someone had thrown it by mistake, but now he was not so sure. So the police took the book. They turned to the final page. The last words had been torn cleanly away, and when they fitted the small scrap from the dead man's hidden pocket against that torn edge, the 2 pieces matched exactly. But the book was not finished giving up its secrets. On the inside back cover, the police found something that has never, in all the decades since, been satisfactorily explained. There were faint indentations on the cover, the kind made when someone presses hard with a pencil while writing on a sheet of paper laid on top. When police enhanced the indentations, three things emerged: a local Adelaide telephone number, another number that may have been a second phone number or part of a code, and 5 lines of capital letters written out one beneath the other, with one of the lines crossed out. The letters form no word in any known language and no pattern any cryptographer could recognize. So it was a code, and to this day, no one has decoded it. The phone number, on the other hand, the police could trace immediately. It belonged to a young woman who lived in a house in Glenelg, less than 500 yards from where the dead man had been found. She was a former nurse. Her real name was Jessica Thompson. To her friends, she went by the nickname Jestin, a name she had also written years earlier into a separate copy of the Rubaiyat that she had given as a gift to a man she had known during the war. When detectives went to interview her, she behaved strangely. She told them she did not know the dead man. She had no idea, she said, how her phone number had come to be written in the back of a book in a stranger's car on Jetty Road. And according to the lead detective on the case, when he showed her a plaster cast of the dead man's face, she became unsteady on her feet, and she looked, in his words, as though she were about to faint and turn away. Then, after a long pause, she insisted again that she did not know him and asked the detectives to leave. She would maintain her silence on this point for the rest of her life. She married. She raised a son named Robin, born in 1947, just a year before the Somerton man's death. She died in 2007 without ever publicly explaining what, if anything, she had known. According to her own daughter, speaking after her mother's death, Jessica Thompson had strongly hinted in private that she did know who the dead man was, and that she had reasons of her own for never telling anyone. So the case became a kind of national obsession in Australia and a curiosity around the world. Every few years, someone announced that they had cracked the code. Every few years, the announcement turned out to be mistaken. Cryptographers from Australian intelligence, from American intelligence, from universities, from amateur message boards, all tried. None succeeded. But the theories piled up. Some thought the dead man had been a Soviet spy killed in the early days of the Cold War. Adelaide was, after all, only a few hundred miles from the Woomera rocket range, one of the most sensitive military testing sites in the southern hemisphere. Others believed he was a jilted lover, a man who had come to find Justin, learned that she had moved on, and chosen the beach beneath her window as a place to end his own life. Some pointed to his dancer's calf muscles and suggested he had been a ballet performer, and some researchers noticed that Jessica Thompson's son, Robin, who would in fact later become a ballet dancer himself, had certain rare physical features, an unusual shape to his ear, and unusual configuration of his teeth that they argued were also visible in the photographs of the dead man. They wondered openly whether Robin had been the Somerton man's son. But these were all theories. Through all of it, the central question, the simplest question, who is this man, remained unanswered for 74 years. In 1995, a young Australian engineer and physicist named Derek Abbott became fascinated by the case. He spent the next 2.5 decades chasing it. He wrote papers. He badgered the South Australian police for access to the dead man's body. And in 2011, he was finally given access to the plaster death mask. Embedded in the plaster, preserved by accident when the cast had been made all those years earlier, were nearly 50 strands of the dead man's hair. The roots, in some cases, were intact. Abbott teamed up with an American genetic genealogist named Colleen Fitzpatrick, who specialized in identified unidentified remains, and together they extracted DNA from the hair, uploaded the genetic profile to a public genealogy database, and built a family tree of more than 4,000 distant relatives. Slowly, they narrowed that tree down to a single name. The name was Carl Webb. Born in Melbourne, Australia in 1905, an electrical engineer and instrument maker, the sixth child of a German immigrant baker, a man who, by the accounts of his surviving relatives, liked to write his own poetry. Married in 1941 to a woman named Dorothy Robertson, and in 1947, the year before the Somerton man died, Carl Webb had simply vanished from the public record. No death certificate, no tax filings, no correspondence. He had walked out of his life in Melbourne, and he had not walked back into it. In July of 2022, Abbott and Fitzpatrick announced their findings. The South Australian police have, as of this recording, not formally confirmed the result, but their work is widely considered to be solid. After 74 years, the man on Somerton Beach almost certainly has a name. And yet, to stand at the edge of this case, even now, is to feel how little a name actually answers. We know who he was. We do not know why he was there. We do not know why a married electrical engineer from Melbourne would walk away from his wife, vanish from his own life, and turn up dead on a beach in Adelaide 18 months later with all the labels cut from his clothing and a Persian poem rolled up in a hidden pocket. We do not know what his connection was to a young nurse who lived a 5-minute walk from where he died, or why her telephone number was pressed into the back cover of a book about the brevity of life. We do not know what the 5 lines of letters in that book were meant to say. And we do not know with any certainty what poison stopped his heart on a warm December evening in 1948. The Rubaiyat teaches that life is short, that meaning is fragile, and that the work of being a person is the work of holding on to the small things while the large things slip away. The Somerton man, whatever else he was, seemed to have died with that book in his mind. He carried 2 of its words against his body sewn into a pocket so well hidden it took the police 6 months to find. He left those 2 words, deliberately or otherwise, as the only message his body would ever speak. Tamam shud. It is finished. He had a name. He had a life. He may have had a son he could not claim, a love he could not return to, and a story that would have explained everything if anyone had ever been able to ask him. Instead, he became a riddle for the rest of us, a man on a beach, a poem in a pocket, a code on a back cover. 78 years on, we are still trying to read him, and perhaps, in the end, that is what he wanted. Perhaps the secret he was protecting was worth more than his name, his face, or even being found. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the crime coroner. Much love and bliss.